When I first moved into the neighborhood, I thought I had finally found peace. The streets were lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, and houses that all looked like they came straight from a real estate magazine. It felt quiet and calm, at least on the surface. I unpacked slowly, taking in the fresh air and the friendly smiles from neighbors passing by. Everyone seemed polite enough, waving as they walked their dogs or watered their lawns. But there was one person whose stare lingered a little too long, Karen. She lived 2 houses down, always in pastel tracksuits, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. The first time she introduced herself, she didn't even say her name. "I'm with the HOA," she announced proudly, as if that meant I should salute her. She started listing rules before I'd even said hello. No trash cans visible from the street, no non-standard mailboxes, no decorations over 12 inches tall. I nodded politely, thinking she was just trying to help a new neighbor fit in. I couldn't have been more wrong. A few days later, I noticed my trash can had been moved. I thought maybe the garbage collectors forgot to set it back properly. But the next morning it was tipped over completely, trash spilling across the sidewalk. I sighed, cleaned it up, and went on with my day. But when it happened again and again, I knew it wasn't an accident. The final confirmation came when I caught her reflection in my window early one morning, sneaking up to my trash can and giving it a deliberate kick. She smirked as she walked away, like she had done her civic duty. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control, and I had just become her newest target. It happened on a Thursday morning right before sunrise. The street was still quiet, and the air was cool with a faint breeze. I stepped outside to grab the newspaper and stopped dead in my tracks. My trash can was once again on its side, garbage scattered across the lawn, with coffee grounds and torn paper fluttering in the wind. At first, I told myself it could have been raccoons or maybe even a gust of wind, but deep down I already knew who was behind it. I just didn't want to believe someone could be so petty. That weekend, I decided to test my theory. I positioned my trash can exactly where it should be and installed a small security camera near the garage, discreet, but with a perfect view of the street. Then I waited. The next morning I replayed the footage and there she was. Karen in her pink bathrobe holding a coffee mug, casually walking by like she owned the place. She stopped, looked around, then gave my trash can a light push with her foot. When it didn't topple, she shoved harder until it fell, spilling everything onto the pavement. She smiled to herself, took a sip of coffee, and strolled away as if she'd done something noble. My blood boiled. It wasn't about the trash. It was about her thinking she could walk all over me. That afternoon I confronted her. "Karen, I know what you did," I said. She didn't even blink. "Your trash can violates HOA standards. I'm helping keep our community clean," she replied smugly. I stood there speechless, half in disbelief, half in fury. She didn't deny it. She was proud of it. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a neighbor. I was dealing with a control freak who thrived on power. After that confrontation, things only got worse. Karen had officially declared war, and I was her chosen opponent. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail, stamped with the HOA logo in big, bold letters. It was a notice of violation claiming that my trash can was visible from the street on non-collection days, and that I would be fined if I didn't correct the issue immediately. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it. The can was tucked neatly beside my garage, barely visible unless someone went out of their way to look for it. And I knew exactly who had. Karen had found a way to make her harassment official. I saw her every morning, clipboard in hand, pretending to inspect the neighborhood. She'd pause in front of my driveway, scribble something down, and move on. I started documenting everything, taking photos of where my trash can stood and saving each letter she sent. Soon she wasn't just knocking it over. She began nitpicking everything, sending notices about improperly coiled garden hoses, unapproved fence color, even the size of my mailbox numbers. It was endless, and the HOA board seemed to back her every time. But I wasn't about to back down. I installed a second camera, this one facing the street directly, just in case she tried anything again. I began printing out still images of her tampering with my property and saving them in a folder labeled HOA Evidence. Every knockdown, every notice, every smug smile, it all went into that folder. She thought she was teaching me a lesson, but she didn't realize I was building a case. I wasn't going to let her push me around forever. The trash can was just the beginning. I was preparing for something much bigger. By the 4th week of her nonsense, I'd reached my breaking point. Every morning felt like déjà vu. Trash scattered across my driveway, garbage bags ripped open, and Karen's smug figure walking away like she'd accomplished something meaningful. The smell of spoiled food and the sight of torn paper everywhere made my blood boil. I had been patient, polite, and even reasonable. But she didn't understand the language of kindness. She only understood control. That's when I decided enough was enough. That night, as I cleaned up the mess yet again, an idea began to form. A few of my friends had joked that I should fill the trash can with bricks or cement so she'd finally learn a lesson. At first I laughed it off, but the more I thought about it, the more it made perfect sense. I didn't want to hurt anyone, just to stop her once and for all. If she wanted to keep knocking over my trash can, maybe it was time she found out it couldn't be moved so easily. I went inside and pulled up a few online tutorials. Concrete mixing wasn't exactly rocket science. All I needed were a few bags of quick-set concrete, a bucket, a mixing stick, and some patience. The next morning I stopped by the hardware store and loaded up my truck, feeling a sense of calm determination I hadn't felt in weeks. That evening, as the sun went down, I got to work. The air was quiet, the street still. I mixed the concrete in small batches and poured it layer by layer into the trash can until it was nearly full. When it hardened, I sealed the top and wheeled it back to its usual spot. It looked perfectly normal. But it now weighed nearly 200 pounds. Tomorrow, Karen would get a surprise she'd never forget. I came home that evening expecting the usual mess. Another toppled can, another pile of soggy trash to sort through. And instead found something far more official pinned to my door. A bright red notice stamped with the HOA seal and the words "Property Seizure. Cease occupation immediately." My stomach dropped. For a second I thought it was a prank, but the notice had a signature, Karen's, and a list of supposed violations that made no sense for a trash can or a yard. Before I could process it, tires crunched on the gravel and her silver SUV rolled up the street like she was conducting a coronation. She stepped out, phone already in hand, filming as if the world needed another one of her triumphant announcements. "This property was always meant for my family," she declared theatrically, pacing my porch and narrating to her audience. I stared at her, the absurdity of it colliding with a sudden cold clarity. She was escalating and fast. Then she produced her final move. Her son, looking bored and annoyed, climbed out of the passenger seat like this was a line item on his social calendar rather than an actual confrontation. Karen shoved the notice into his hands and announced, loud and smug, that they were reclaiming the cabin for his inheritance. He didn't look supportive. He barely glanced up from his phone. I called the sheriff. When the deputy arrived, Karen instantly shifted tactics, going soft and claiming it was just a misunderstanding, that she had only been protecting the community's heritage. The deputy listened, then asked to see documentation. I handed over my deed, the certified copies of historical records, and the foreclosure paperwork proving the line of ownership. The deputy scanned them with an expression that mixed annoyance and disbelief, told Karen she needed to leave, and warned her about returning. As her SUV disappeared down the road, the adrenaline drained out of me and left a quiet resolve in its place. She hadn't won. She'd just shown how far she would go. And now I knew exactly how far I was willing to go back. The next few days were eerily calm, almost too calm. After Karen's ridiculous attempt to reclaim my property, I expected her to double down immediately. Instead, she went silent. No letters, no complaints, no late-night knocks on my door. For a moment, I thought maybe the sheriff's warning had finally scared her straight. But deep down I knew better. Karen wasn't the kind of person who quit, she just regrouped. Sure enough, by the end of the week, the whispers began. Neighbors who used to wave started glancing away. One even muttered that I was causing trouble for the community. That's when I realized Karen was spreading rumors, twisting the story to make me the villain. According to her, I had stolen community property, illegally modified the trash area, and even assaulted her through negligence. It sounded insane, but she said it so confidently that people believed her. Still, I didn't react. I knew patience was my best weapon. Instead, I quietly strengthened my defense. I backed up all my footage to cloud storage, printed timestamped photos, and made copies of every HOA letter. I even placed a second camera across the street to catch a wider angle, just in case she tried anything else. And then one Friday morning she struck again. I woke to the sound of shouting and metal scraping. I rushed outside to find Karen, red-faced and furious, trying once again to move my concrete-filled trash can. She had brought her son this time, both of them grunting and struggling as they tried to budge the immovable can. When it didn't move, she lost her balance and tumbled backward into the curb, screeching like I'd attacked her. I stood there, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. The cameras caught everything. This time she hadn't just embarrassed herself. She had given me undeniable proof of her harassment. When I watched the footage later that day, I couldn't help but laugh, not out of cruelty, but out of sheer disbelief at how far Karen was willing to go. The video showed her marching across my lawn with righteous fury, tugging at the trash can like she was wrestling a bear. Her son stood by awkwardly, trying to help but clearly regretting every second of it. Then came the moment she yanked with all her strength, lost her footing, and went flying backward onto the pavement. The fall wasn't serious, but the look on her face afterward was priceless. A mixture of shock, embarrassment, and wounded pride. By that afternoon my doorbell rang. Karen stood there, clutching her wrist dramatically, claiming she'd sustained an injury from unsafe property modifications. She tried to sound official, using HOA terms like negligence and community safety standards. I stayed calm, told her she shouldn't have been on my property to begin with, and reminded her that I had everything on camera. Her confident mask cracked for just a moment, and I knew she understood she was caught. The next day, I received an email from the HOA board requesting that I attend an emergency meeting regarding a potential community hazard. It was clearly Karen's doing. She'd probably gone straight to them, spinning her story about how my illegal concrete trap had nearly crippled her. I smiled, opened the video file, and attached it to my reply with one simple line: "You might want to review this before the meeting." That evening, I could already see her pacing on her porch, phone glued to her ear, probably realizing the narrative had slipped out of her hands. For once I didn't feel angry, I felt patient. Because this time the truth was going to do the talking for me. The night of the HOA meeting arrived, and the community center was buzzing. Word had spread quickly. Apparently Karen had told half the neighborhood that I had turned my trash can into a weapon. People were whispering as I walked in, some curious, others judgmental. At the front of the room sat the board. 5 members who looked tired of hearing complaints from both of us. Karen was already there, standing beside a poster board filled with printed photos of my driveway and highlighted sections from the HOA handbook. She looked proud, like she'd just prepared for a court trial. When my turn came to speak, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply plugged in my laptop, opened the video file, and hit play. The footage spoke louder than any defense I could have given. The board watched as Karen crept up to my trash can, tried to push it, then slipped and fell hard onto the curb. A few people in the audience gasped. One even stifled a laugh. Karen's face turned red as the video ended. "So," I said calmly, "this is what I've been dealing with for weeks. Repeated harassment, vandalism, and false reports." The HOA president leaned back in his chair, clearly unimpressed with Karen's theatrics. "Karen," he said slowly, "do you have any evidence that he violated a rule?" She opened her mouth, sputtering about community standards and appearances, but it was clear she had nothing. The board exchanged glances before the president added, "You might want to refrain from touching your neighbor's property again." The room fell silent. Karen gathered her papers, muttering under her breath, and stormed out before the meeting even ended. For the first time since moving in, I felt the tension lift. The truth had finally caught up to her, and everyone had seen it for themselves. After that meeting, everything in the neighborhood shifted. The same people who once avoided me suddenly started waving when they drove by. Some even stopped to chat, quietly admitting they had dealt with Karen's meddling too but were too afraid to speak up. It turned out I wasn't the first person she had harassed, just the first who stood up to her and had proof. Word spread quickly that Karen had been humiliated at the HOA meeting, and the once untouchable queen of the neighborhood had lost her crown. A week later, an email circulated from the HOA board announcing that Karen had been relieved of her compliance duties, effective immediately. In other words, she was fired. No more clipboard, no more power, no more morning patrols to inspect mailboxes and lawns. The neighborhood felt lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted. Even the air seemed quieter without her constant nagging and reporting. Of course, Karen didn't take it well. For a few days, she glared from her porch whenever I rolled my trash can to the curb, though she never came near it again. Sometimes I caught her whispering to neighbors, trying to spin new stories, but nobody listened. Her authority was gone and everyone knew it. I kept things cordial, never gloating, just going about my business. The trash can, still filled with solid concrete, stood like a monument to her downfall, quiet, unmoving, and stronger than ever. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about setting a boundary that couldn't be pushed. By the end of the month, the HOA held another meeting, this time to discuss improving community harmony. Ironically, they asked me to help draft the new neighbor guidelines. I accepted, smiling as I passed Karen's house on the way. She didn't even look up. The reign of Karen was officially over. Weeks passed, and peace finally returned to the neighborhood. The mornings were quiet again. No more anonymous letters, no more overturned trash, and definitely no more pink tracksuits marching up and down the street like a self-appointed warden. I could finally enjoy simple things. Sipping coffee on my porch, waving to neighbors who now smiled sincerely, and hearing the hum of lawnmowers instead of Karen's constant complaints. My concrete-filled trash can remained right where it belonged, untouched and immovable, standing as a silent reminder of the battle I'd fought and won. Karen still lived down the street, but she'd changed. The once proud, loud enforcer now kept her head down, pretending not to see me whenever our paths crossed. Occasionally, I'd catch her peering through her curtains when the garbage truck came, probably remembering the day her ego met its match in a 200-pound trash can. She'd lost her power and with it, her audience. Without the HOA authority behind her, she was just another neighbor. One who'd learned the hard way that intimidation doesn't always get results. One afternoon, as I rolled the new trash can beside the old concrete one, I noticed a small note taped to my mailbox. It was from Karen. Just 3 words. Truce. I'm done. I smiled, tore it off and tossed it in the regular can, not out of spite but closure. The feud was finally over. Looking back, I realized it wasn't just about a trash can. It was about standing up for myself, for fairness, and for peace of mind. Sometimes you can't reason with people who thrive on control, you have to outsmart them instead. My quiet street was peaceful again, the way it was meant to be. And every Monday morning as the garbage truck rumbled by, I couldn't help but smile at my solid, unshakable victory.